2017 series. So here we see logging on to the application interface Siebel/SMC application, providing the primordial user ID you entered in the AI installer and the password. So this is a one-off user. First thing you're gonna set up is the connection to the gateway. So you have to provide the FQDN and HTTPS port number of the gateway application container. Once you've done this, you're prompted to set up the gateway security profile. So you can give it any name, but gateway is a good idea. And enter the data source. So that is a name for the data source and a type for the security adapter. So we're going to use database authentication here. Point to the database. It's an Oracle database on the local machine. Provide the service name for database and the table owner. And on the second page, select your new data source and provide a user as admin, for example, to test the connection. And once you successfully save that, you get the message that you have to re-log in, now using the proper S-admin user account. So the one-off user is not there. Step 3 of the Bootstrap process is to create the gateway service with the registry, as you know is now no longer in Siebel. So we're going to provide the port which will be used to connect to the registry. You can keep the default if you haven't used it already, the 2320. You enter a username for the registry, the password. You use as admin all over the place here. And save. So at this point, you're actually creating the Siebel Gateway name server service. Since we are on Windows, we should be able to locate it actually. So in our notes, we enter the registry port in case we need them later. And you see an empty deployment, so there's nothing in the registry as of yet. And if you look into the services on Windows, we find the Siebel Gateway name server running, and it's set to automatic by default. And you can make out the port number you provided in the command line details for the gateway. Despite what it says here, it's no longer using Siebel-stat or whatever. It's a Apache Zookeeper registry. So this service needs to be up and running to do the rest here. And it starts with creating profiles. So we have created a security profile already. So now the next one is create an enterprise profile. There is a default sample profile. You can clone, copy it literally, and change the copy. That's a recommended way of doing things here. Much of what you enter here is very familiar to seasoned Siebel guys or gals, because this is basically what we entered in the old configuration wizard. So now profiles are a way of storing template, boilerplate information. So we create the enterprise profile here, provide a path to the future file system. Since this is a new installation, it will create the file system, and provide a username and password for the authentication. And very familiar, you provide the primary database connectivity for the enterprise. Click next to go through these pages. Specify the authentication profile to use, primary language, and the encryption for Sysnami. So you don't select anything here, which should be fine. Or just select without encryption maybe. So submit this. The profile is now stored. You can retrieve and change it anytime, and now we can use it to deploy the enterprise. So you go to deployment, click plus enterprise, specify the profile you want to use, select deploy, and enter a name for the enterprise. optionally change the default description. And then click Submit. So now this would take a few moments. So you might want to hit the refresh button to see if it goes from deployment in progress to deployed, and it should do so after a few moments, so that could be a few minutes even. So what it basically does, it writes the new enterprise into the registry, just as it had done in previous Siebel versions with Siebel Enterprise. So one more refresh and it's there, it's deployed. So that is our enterprise. Now we can start with Siebel servers. Since now we have a proper enterprise to maintain the Siebel servers, we clone the existing sample server profile, rename it, and specify the correct username and password. Make sure you override this one. Same for the anonymous user. Guest CST is just fine, but the password's probably not fine. And choose component groups. And remember, this is something you do in all the Siebel versions as well when you specify a Siebel server. It's just a profile that stores this as a boilerplate. Choosing Siebel Web Tools as a new component group is a good idea, so you have access to Siebel Web Tools immediately. Don't overdo it with component groups, you can add them later. And there's the connection broker port and the synchronization manager port as usual. We don't specify any specials, encryption, clustering, other information, should all be fine. And submit and save this new Siebel server profile and go to deployment and click plus to deploy the Siebel server. So the hostname HTTPS port, that's really the container name for the Siebel server machine. So in our case, it's the same machine name. We make sure it's the HTTPS port of the application container on the server machine. We choose deploy immediately, so to speak, Siebel server name, description, and you can also choose languages to deploy. Of course, you must have the language pack installed first. And now, when you click Submit, on that machine, where the Tomcat must be running, of course, it will generate the Siebel server service, and it will also launch the Siebel server. So this process is quite lengthy, since we have observed in our experiments that it actually stops and restarts the server at least once. So you have to be patient here, and after a few minutes you should have a Siebel server successfully deployed in your enterprise. Next step is to just go down the route here and generate a profile for an application interface which replaces the Siebel web server extension and third-party web server. The whole combination is replaced by the application interface. So again, it's about cloning or copying an existing profile, which are seeded